Hi, this is Robin Beaumont here. This is the second in a series of YouTube videos providing a quick, simple introduction to R. This time we'll be looking at how we can structure our data in R to allow us to analyse it effectively. One of the simplest data structures in R is the vector. You can think of the vector as being a column of data. So here is a column of data, 19, 19, 20, etc., made up of 10 what we call elements. We join these together into a column by using the C, a lowercase c, lowercase, and it stands for concatenate, which means join together. We join these values together to form this column, this vector, and we use this left-handed arrow sign, which means get or assign. So we assign to x1 this column of 10 values, and it just so happens that it knows that this is a vector, this is a column. So we press return, nothing happens until we type in x1, and there we see a vector or column with 10 values in it. You can also apply various functions in R. All a function is something that takes in one or more values and gives us out a result. So here's a function called length, takes in our vector, and out comes the number of elements, the length of that vector. We can also use some other functions in R. A very good one is mean, and guess what that does? It gives us a mean of those values. The various elements can be of different types. They can be numbers, they can be characters, or they can be this thing called factors. And factors are incredibly useful because they allow us to divide up our data into subgroups so we can analyse across these various subgroups. Let's look at an example of a factor. Here's an example of a factor. Again, we use a function here called factor appropriately, and it takes in certain things, certain values, parameters they're called technically, and it takes in a set of values which defines the factor. So here got 5 ones and then 5 twos, and we're saying that the ones are equal to England and the twos are given the label Scotland, are equal to Scotland. So what we have here is 10 values in all which make up our factor, and there are 2 values at various levels. We say there's a level there, which are the ones, and another level there, the twos. And these levels defined as England and Scotland. You might have more than 2 levels, but here we're having 2 levels. And you can think of actually these 2 vectors we've got now, of the 10 values here being ages of students, and we might have 5 ages, the first 5 being from England, and the second 5 being from Scotland. And again we use this get operator, so once we've got the factor, out pops a factor called grouping underscore var. So we call their factor grouping underscore var. In the values there, out comes grouping var. Press return. Obviously you don't see anything until we type in the name. Just type in grouping var. R knows that's a factor now, and we get our values for each of them. You may realise I was hinting above that it would be nice actually to join these 2 vectors together. And how we do that is use the most important data structure in R called a data frame. Let's look at how we create a data frame. Here we are. We've got the function called data.frame here. Takes in the 2 vectors we've defined, and then out pops our data frame, and I've called it my data frame here. So in is the right hand side, out is the left hand side. Press return. Don't see anything until we type in my data frame. Now my data frame consists of 2 vectors, 2 columns, one called x1, one called grouping var. We can also apply a function directly to the data frame. So summary will give us a summary of each of these columns, these vectors. And press return. There we are. There's a summary for the first column, and it knows that it's actually a variable, a set of numbers, and it tells us a minimum, mean, interquartile range, median, and the max. Similarly, it knows that the second column, a factor we defined it as, remember? So all we can do with factors is tell us how many observations are in each level. So it tells us there are 5 observations in the first level and 5 observations in the second level. We can also divide up our data via the factor level and get summary results. And to do that, we use what's known as the tapply function. So here the tapply function actually takes in vectors. It doesn't take in a data frame. So we've got the vectors here, and then what we've asked for is the means for each of those. So, and here we are. So what it's done is divided up x1 by the 2 levels in a grouping variable and given us a mean for each. So we can see for those in England the average is 20 years, and those in Scotland the average is 18.2 years. We don't have to use the mean here, we can use other values to ask for. So let's actually try summary this time. So now we have summary. We should get these set of values divided up by the 2 levels in a grouping variable. Let's see. And we do. There we are. So that's a minimum, a maximum, a mean, a median for those in England and those in Scotland. When we are actually defining a data frame, we can rename these columns because it looks a bit naff having x1 and grouping var here, and to do that we just add a bit more information in the function data.frame. Let's see how that looks. Here we are, data.frame, and we say x1 is called ages and the grouping var is called location. So press return now, and now if we did my data frame, we'd actually get to see the names we've designated. There we are. So now we've got ages and location at the top as well. And similarly, if we ask for a summary of our 2 vectors, it gives us it by ages and location this time instead of x1. We might actually want to try and just get the ages variable vector on its own. So we could type in ages like this, but we get a problem. We can't do that because actually we haven't told R that we are using this particular data frame, my data frame. And to do that we have to attach it. Alright, but before I do that I just want to mention that we can get to ages just by saying my data frame, then we use the $sign and also type in my data frame correctly, and then put the name of the element we're interested in, the vector ages, and now we'll get it. But if we use this magic command called attach my data frame, it basically puts that particular data frame in view. That's got focus in R now. So now, except we mistyped it, attach. Now if we say ages, it'll know what we're talking about. There we are. So carried out a lot in a short time really. We looked at structuring and defining data, and we started off with a simple vector which consisted of 10 elements, and we used the C, the concatenate operator, and we used the left-handed arrow to say we assign the vector x1 these 10 values. We then defined a grouping variable which we just gave 10 values to of 2 different levels to begin with, but then we changed them into a factor so they could be used in a particular way. So we said our vector called grouping becomes a factor, and we give those 2 levels the labels England and Scotland. So grouping bar becomes a factor of that vector with those 2 levels. Then we created the most complex kind of structure in R, the data frame, and we used the data frame function, and we put in it the column names, our vectors, and then out came our data frame. And we could create more than one data frame if we wanted to. So here's an example of another data frame as well. The problem was we wanted to be able to focus R to one particular data frame, so we could refer to those vectors in that data frame without using the $sign. So we used the attach command. And we also could have given the vectors, once we put them in the data frame, new names. Instead of x1 and grouping bar, we could have called it ages and locations. as is shown in the final command below there. Besides structuring and defining our data set, we also carried out some simple basic descriptive statistics, and we used a function called mean with a vector, and we got the mean value of it. We also used the summary function to get the minimum, maximum, mean, median and interquartile range of a vector. We also used that command with the data frame, and we got for each vector in the data frame the summary statistics. And we also used the tapply command to a set of vectors, one which was the value, the continuous variable, and then one which was the vector, which was a factor, which provided a set of subgroups, and then we asked for a particular command for each of those subgroups. So that's the summary. We used mean as well. The next YouTube video we'll be looking at how we import SPSS, Excel and text files into R.